welcome, and today I'm going to talk about flowers. An exciting topic, I'm aware, but more specifically, the beautiful world, okay, let me preface this actually. I actually went out into the real world to find books, this one's tiny, on florography. So this is book one. I have not read this one yet because there's a reason. I have been way too engrossed in this one, in this version. This is Floriography. This is the one that was like recommended to me as like the best, and I'm not gonna lie, probably. Like, I'm not into florography or anything. I have thumbed through this book a little bit. If I were to go back and choose between these two, it'd be this one all the way. Anyway, regardless of me, venturing out into the earth to find this book, I don't want to just talk about flowers. I want to talk about floriography. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, but floriography is the language of flowers, which is super fascinating, not only because it started in the Victorian era, which awesome. I'm always a fan of like Victorian history and the Middle Ages and stuff like that. Not only did it come from the Victorian era, it's still not used today, but still applicable today. These flowers still have the same meaning, and if you give someone a bouquet of specific flowers, it still means specific things, even though they might not know who it is. Not who it is, what it is. Even though they might not know the meaning behind the bouquet, you will, and it is still applicable. So this caught my eye, and I figured, why not learn about the language of flowers? And so I read through this entire book. It is beautiful, by the way. This is what it looks like. So it'll start out with like the name of the flower up top. Then usually here's one that's better. Usually the scientific name is right under that. The bookmark just fell out right under that. Then there's the meaning, the origin of the meaning, and then what to pair with and what it'll mean if you pair with it. And then it also has bouquets in the back. Like there's only like 4 of them, but like bouquet for marriage. And it tells you like what to wrap it with and whatever. Anyway, not supposed to be gushing about the book, but the book is amazing. It has very beautiful illustrations of each flower. It's very like beginner friendly, not super info dumping, and it'll get you into florography. So good book, but that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about some specific flowers. Like this one has a lot of flowers. You would think that this is not a lot of flower, but it is. It's so much flower. But anyway, goodness gracious. I picked out a couple that I really liked, either the story or like it relates to pop culture, or it really caught my eye because you wouldn't think of the flower having that meaning, and I wanted to talk about them. So, the first that like caught my eye, because I didn't realize that this was like a flower actively given to people, is called apple blossom. So I don't want to just read from the book because that would be boring. So I'm going to try to paraphrase as much as I possibly can without losing like the meaning. So the meaning behind giving someone an apple blossom, or the meaning behind apple blossoms, is preference. Which, why? So essentially, the meaning comes from a fable called the Golden Apple of Discord. In Greek mythology, the deity of discord took a golden apple and threw it into a wedding that she wasn't invited to. Well, other deities of Greek mythos were invited, and 3 of them, Athena, Hera, and I believe Aphrodite, were there, and they all kind of laid claim to said golden apple. They were like, yep, That's mine. And that created discord. But there was another person there, I don't remember their name, that had to choose between Athena, Aphrodite, and I've forgotten the first name I said. I think it's Hera. That doesn't sound right. But basically he chose, and that created the Battle of Athens, therefore discord. But it does mean preference, because his preference, that person's preference, sowed the seeds of discord. So apple blossoms mean preference, has a pretty cool origin. I will read out of the book for this because I'm not going to be able to remember what you pair them with, but apple blossom paired with pansy to show the recipient you're thinking of them, or zinnia, I'm going to mispronounce all of the hard ones, for a gift for a best friend. So that's super interesting. It's Helen, not Hera. Helen. But yeah, not the Battle of Athens, the Trojan War. Me and my paraphrasing. It was a battle. I was trying to remember. I thought Athena, Battle of Athens. No, he spurred on the Trojan War with his preference. So that is apple blossom. I think that's super cool because I didn't know that people gave other people flowers from apple trees, and they do. There's also in here another one. You can give orange blossoms as well, which is very interesting to me. There are a couple others that I will not mention that are in here that surprised me, that would even be a gift in general, like as a flower. Interesting stuff. Anyway, moving on. The next one I want to talk about is belladonna, which at first I thought it was going to, for some reason, relate to the character Bellatrix from Harry Potter, but then no, this is Victorian era flowers, not modern day era flowers. But I knew that belladonna had some like connection to not good things. And I was right, because its alternate name is Deadly Nightshade, and that name I had heard before, so. The meaning of belladonna, or Deadly Nightshade, is silence, which is super cool. It's kind of all over the place. The origin comes from it being like one of the most toxic plants on Earth, and so, you know, the Romans used it as poison, and the name also kind of comes from, or the scientific name rather, which I will not be pronouncing, also comes from Greek mythos, which is, the scientific name kind of relates to the oldest of the three fates, which was known for cutting the string of life and causing death. So the origin of its meaning kind of is sprinkled throughout both Roman and Greek mythos, and the flower itself is in fact very poisonous, very toxic. So it would be paired with columbine and begonia to urge someone to keep a secret, or Roux to warn the recipient to keep quiet lest they regret it. Cool flower, awesome alternate name. I would definitely go with Deadly Nightshade. That seems really cool. I still don't know where I've heard that before, but, you know, begonias, or not begonias, belladonna is a very interesting plant, and even its scientific name has roots in different mythos, so that's very interesting. The next flower is columbine, which, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I know where that name pops up for me, but the flower itself is actually a really beautiful purple flower, and its meaning is rooted in foolishness, which is interesting. So the origin of the meaning for this flower being foolishness is from, I believe, an Italian play. Now, I'm not sure it gives me the name of where it's from, but first of all, I cannot pronounce it, and second of all, I don't know if it's a play or a book or something. Anyway, it's in Italy, and it stems from a woman whose name is singular to the flower, who is in love with the court jester, or the fool, Harlequin. Again, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I do believe it's Harlequin. It's spelled the exact same as Harlequin. Anyway, so the flower's origin may come from her being in love with the fool, or like so ready to make a fool of herself and others. That bit is not exactly known. Anyway, you would pair Columbine with a flower I'm gonna have difficulties pronouncing. Hold on. Ashvatl, that's the best I'm getting. To ask for forgiveness for an imprudent mistake, or protee, to show you are working to make a big change and correct past mistakes. So, yeah, beautiful flower. Odd kind of meaning, but I believe the origin also comes from, I just remember this, the fact that the flower looks like the hat of a jester. So I thought that was pretty cool as well, which it kind of does. Moving forward, the next flower is cornflower. This flower's meaning is hope in love, which comes from an old kind of like wives' tale where it's the flowers are oh my gosh. The flower is also referred to as the bachelor's button, where young men would place the flower onto their like pin it on them basically, and if the flower is to die quickly, then it was an unrequited love that they were going through. However, if the bloom stayed for a long period of time, there was hope in their love. So I thought that was pretty cool. But to pair this flower with lilac would be a gift for a first love, and or sweet William, to show you will always be true. So, cornflowers. A seemingly, like, small plant. I have not heard many people be like, oh yeah, cornflowers are my favorite. Have a really deep origin rooted in love in general. So, interesting, to say the least, but the next flower is one of my favorites that I've read from in here. One of my favorites that I've read from in here, which is daffodils. So daffodils, a white, very pretty, honestly, flower, at least how it's illustrated in the book. It is for unrequited love. That's what the meaning is. And it comes from, because of its scientific name, it comes from the Greek myth of Narcissus, who, while looking into I believe it was a small lake or pond, fell in love with his reflection, and because he was so in love with his reflection, he couldn't leave, and therefore died. And where he died, daffodils bloomed. So, interesting story. I didn't know one could love oneself so much, but it is Narcissus, which is, I believe, also where probably narcissist comes from, the Greek legend of Narcissus. That's probably where narcissist comes from. But you'd pair with clover for hope for change, or sweet pea to indicate giving up on an ill-suited romance. Pretty flowers, interesting story, kind of a sad meaning for a flower to mean unrequited love, but fear not, they get so much worse in how beautiful they can be and how really sad the meaning can be, which is kind of the same for the next flower, which is my favorite flower, not of the book, but in general, of forget-me-nots. So unsurprisingly, the forget-me-not flowers, which are very small blue flowers, the meaning is forget-me-not, which the origin is that two lovers were walking along the side of a river, and when the girl went to admire the flowers, the guy, he leaned down to try to pick the flowers for her, ultimately falling into the rushing river and being swept away, throwing the flowers that he had picked for her at her and yelling, "Forget me not." So a little sad, but the meaning ties, not only am I a fan that the forget-me-not flowers actually mean forget-me-not, I am also a fan that the forget-me-not flowers, the story is so simple and yet so, like, I don't know, it just seems right for that kind of flower. But you would pair it with zinnia for a friend who is moving away, larkspur to say remember the good times, or oak for a long-distance relationship. Interesting. And they are just very, like, insignificant, small blue flowers. So, it's an interesting thing that so many people, I feel like, forget about the flower being, meaning something, but its whole thing is forget-me-not. So anyway, moving on is a flower I have certainly never heard of, which is called foxglove. So foxglove is an actual, like, really interesting flower, but both in its look and its story. It's associated with a lot of fairy folklore and was once thought to actually be folklove instead of foxglove. But essentially, it's because of the way it looks and how the flowers are downturned. It was said that fairies used to make their homes within the flower itself, and children would put their ears up to it to see if they could hear the riddles of fairies that they would, talk about. And but it was ingrained in children that picking these flowers would actually be bad because it would lead to bad luck, and the entirety of these stories may have actually been to keep the children away from the flowers, or at least away from picking them and eating them, because they were poisonous. So the flowers meant riddles and secrets. That's a very interesting story to me. I really like that, it's not just, hey, it's a Greek mythos, it's, hey, this is a folk tale that we told children, probably to keep them from eating these things. But you would pair with lavender to warn a friend of an unfaithful love, or hyacinth to ask for forgiveness in divulging a secret. So, fairies is a new one. I don't think fairies are mentioned very much in this book at all. I know nymphs are mentioned about 3 different times, but fairies, I think foxglove is the only one where fairies appear in this book. So, first mention of fairies, last mention of fairies, and poisonous flower. So that's, really cool. Anyway, the next flower is hemlock. Now, I picked hemlock to talk about because it's a very white, pretty flower. I've probably put an image of it. Anyway, it's a very white, pretty flower, but its meaning is rooted in death. I'm not joking. And that's because hemlock is a very poisonous flower that that causes paralysis and death. And the most famous instance of this flower being used as such is Socrates, who drank a tea made out of the flower and died because of, he died because he was poisoned because of the way he thought, and he was challenging so many different viewpoints. So a white flower, a small white flower you would think to see at weddings, is actually extraordinarily poisonous, and its meaning is death. Anyway, pair it with chrysanthemum for condolences upon the loss of a loved one, or nettle for a loved one who has been taken away too soon. Interesting flower, especially with how it looks, and definitely an interesting origin tying back to Socrates and the history of thinking differently. But speaking of hyacinth, I believe it mentioned it here. No, it didn't. I don't know why I'm thinking of hyacinth then. But thinking of hyacinth, the next flower is hyacinth, which I actually know quite a bit about, because, meaning-wise, I know quite a bit about meaning-wise because hyacinth was actually a major plot point in the flower in a book that I was reading a long time ago, that I unfortunately never got to finish. Anyway, I knew a long time ago that hyacinths meant forgive me, but this book obviously allowed me to delve a little deeper into that. So the actual specific origin of this flower that the book gives, or not the origin, the meaning is please forgive me, not just forgive me. And the origin comes from the Greek, again, where a young, beautiful man called Hyacinthus, I believe, was beloved by Apollo. Well, during the Olympic Games, in a disc throwing tournament, to be exact, Apollo's disc was knocked off course by a jealous contender, I guess. And it actually struck Hyacinthus, causing him to die. And as Apollo, begged for forgiveness, please forgive me, it was said that hyacinths grew where his blood trickled from his head. Which is an interesting and very sad story. A little bit of bittersweet. I guess the sweet only comes because the flowers got to bloom. It's mostly bitter. Anyway, pair with olive to ask for peace and forgiveness, obviously, and pansy to indicate your betrayal haunts you. So, interesting stuff. Like I said, hyacinth has always been like a flower I knew meaning-wise what it meant, and I knew how beautiful it was because of an old book I used to read. But to know that it is also, it also has its roots in Greek mythology, which I am a huge fan of, and of course the Greeks have to make it tragic, because why not? It's basically what I'm trying to say is I love this flower and its meaning even more, knowing that it's not only rooted in Greek mythology, but it is a beautiful flower with a heartfelt meaning behind it. But speaking of the Greeks and a story that has become books and movies and books and books and so many books, is kind of the story of Hades and Persephone, more aptly Minth and the flower associated mint. And so, no matter how you've heard the story of Hades and Persephone, I believe that Minth is probably a more forgotten character in that. Minth fell in love with Hades and, pined after him, and Persephone, the jealous woman that she is, because the Greeks are all very jealous people, apparently, or jealous deities. Anyway, Persephone, oh my gosh, I can't speak. The jealous person that she is turned Minth into a mint plant. Well, for Minth's, I guess, consolation prize, mint was then associated with death and was used to cover the smell of decaying bodies, and I believe was even put around gravestones as well. So as, her consolation prize, instead of being with the man she was in love with, she is now forever a mint plant, which is, associated with death. But I don't think I said the meaning throughout all of that, which is actually consolation. And you would pair it with passion flower for faith that circumstances will improve, and cornflower to tell a friend they are thought of and loved during a difficult time. So I figured I'd throw that one in there because I know that Hades and Persephone and their love story is so, wow, cool, awesome, and it's been told so many times, and I know Minth is a part of that story, but not so much. She's more of a background character, or she seems to be, in the way I've heard things. I've heard her name, but I haven't heard much about her, and so this was my first look into who Minth was, and besides just knowing that she liked Hades, who Minth was and how she was related to mint. the plant. And it was interesting to see, because of that story, mint and mint are now associated with death. Not so much, I'd say not so much anymore. Definitely in modern times, mint is not related with death anymore, but maybe it should be. I think the smell of mint at a funeral would be nice. Moving to another name I've heard before is oleander. This beautiful flower, again, I don't know where oh, maybe I've heard blue oleander before. Anyway, not important. Oleander its meaning is caution, and this again pulls from Greek and their mythos, a tale between two people. I believe it's Hero and Leander, and so they were in love, but they were separated by this sea, and so it couldn't stop them, essentially, and Leander swam across that sea every night to go see his love, Hero. That's how I'm gonna pronounce it. I'm not gonna pronounce it Hero. Anyway, during a particularly violent storm, Leander perished swimming over to Hero, and when Hero saw his body wash upon the sea, she called out, "Oh, Leander, and that kind of gave the flower its name, I suppose, and it associated it, therefore, with caution. To pair it with azalea is to warn someone that they're about to make a poor choice. You could also pair it with sunflower to caution a friend against a bad investment. But I really love that story. I know that romance is exaggerated now, but it's exaggerated in the sense where it's really, really weird, in my opinion. Like, it's more, at least from what I've heard, I think more in the popular talk is the ones where it's like stalking and murder and death and stuff like that. So it's in the public's eye, romance now is exaggerated in a way where it's more violent and aggressive. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Greek or Roman or Norse or Egyptian or any of that is very nice and sweet and awesome and beautiful and everything goes right, and love stories are never tragic or never aggressive or never whatever. What I am saying is I would like to see more stories, even though it's bittersweet, of more romance stories exaggerated in the way that like Hero and Leander's was, right? Where it's like, I love you so much that I'm not gonna put cameras in your house. No. I'm gonna swim across I think it was like a whole lake or a sea or something. It was like a large body of water to come see you every night, just because that's how much I love you. Something like that. I don't know. I feel like in the popular mind, we don't exaggerate like that. We tend to exaggerate in more aggressive ways. I don't know why that is. But moving to a more calmer flower, and another flower rooted in the modern world, is poppy. Now, poppy flowers, the reason I say that they are rooted in the modern world is because of poppy playtime. That's the only way I know how they're related to the modern world, besides the fact that they are used to make opium. This is a good time to slip in its meaning. It means eternal sleep, and it's because of what it does. Obviously, it's used to make opium, and it has narcotic effects. It is also said that again, pulling back to the Greeks, because everyone loves the Greeks, poppy is said to bloom in the land of the dead. So, interesting. There's not much else here in this book about poppy. I assume that there's more in Greek myths or in history where poppy is used more in like meanings where it would tie back to eternal sleep, but I think it's most tied to that meaning through its narcotic effects and the fact that it makes opium. Anyway, Pair this beautiful flower with snowdrop for the loss of a loved one, or dahlia to mark the grave of a cherished companion. Beautiful red flower. Obviously, eternal sleep is linked with death, so it would make sense in those correlations. Now, I would be remiss and kind of hate myself if I didn't talk about the most popular flower from history time to modern ages to everywhere and everything, and if you even dare to walk in a store on Valentine's Day, oh my gosh, they're everywhere. Roses. So we all know that I don't think I have to explain that roses are tied to a meaning that is love. And they've been tied that way for a long time, and throughout history and many cultures, everywhere roses meant love. However, for the Victorians specifically, I believe they tied different meanings to different colors. So white meant, I believe, pure love, pink was like a new love, and red was true love, etc., because there are many variations of roses. But furthermore, it is also named the Queen of Flowers, because of course it is. And not only is of course it is the Queen of the Flowers, of course it's tied to the Greeks. So in Greek mythos, I believe the deity's name is Calorus. I don't know, but that's how I'm going to pronounce it. Found a dead nymph and decided to turn it into a flower. Well, she could not. That was a weird way to say well. Well, she could not just be satisfied with a flower. No. She gathered a bunch of other people, a bunch of other deities to make this flower beautiful. Now, I can't remember all of them, so I am going to read somewhat out of the book for this, at least for the names. But I know it was Apollo, to warm the bloom, Aphrodite to lend it her beauty, Dionysus to add sweet nectar, and 3 Graces to supply charm, joy, and magnificence. Calorus called the rose the Queen of the Flowers. So, I was a little tired of the rose being the top of everyone loves roses, it's the greatest flower out there. With this, I'm a little less tired of it. You know, it earned its name through Greek myth and Victorian language, and it's been tied to all the cultures, and you know, it earned its spot at the top. So, pair it with baby's breath for wedding celebration and cornflower for hope in a new romantic pursuit. And of course, it all means different depending on the color of the rose. Now we're coming down to our last 2 here. I didn't pick too many out of this book because it's got a lot of information, a lot of flowers, and just it's a good book. I'm gonna start talking about it again if I don't stop. Anyway, coming down to our last 2. 1, sunflower, which is a beautiful flower. I know that there are a lot of myths surrounding the sunflower. One I will always remember from childhood is that, and I believe it's Greek again. I could be wrong, actually. Anyway, I remember very little of this tale, but I remember that I think a woman fell in love with the sun deity or the sun itself or whatever, and so she had someone or wished to be a flower so that they are together forever or whatever. Anyway, the woman eventually turns into a sunflower and she always follows her love or the sun. That's the only thing I remember of it, but that tale was told to me so long ago that those are the amount of details that I can give. Anyway, sunflowers are linked to, or their meaning is, false riches. Now, this comes from the Inca, which believed that the sunflower was related, I believe, in some way to the sun deity Inta. I'm sure I'm pronouncing all of that incorrectly, but anyway, they basically they used gold to create decorations and decorations of these flowers, and they wore them and they placed them on their temples. And when the Spanish conquistadors arrived, they were amazed at these riches. So when they first came upon a sunflower field, they thought they had found a field of gold. For a moment, that is. And in this moment, that is what gave sunflowers their meaning of false riches, which is very interesting that, you know, the sunflower isn't linked to Greek mythology for once, though I'm sure there is a Greek myth about a sunflower somewhere. Anyway, pair it with bluebell and columbine to show humility for foolish past behavior, or lavender to indicate distrust in a business partner. So, sunflowers, the beautiful yellow, huge flower that follows the sun, is actually related to false riches, which is very interesting considering it follows the sun, which is, which grants the earth riches. I guess I think I'm pulling at strings here. Anyway, the last flower is lavender. Okay, I believe I said lavender, but it's actually violet, and it's violet is tied to or means modesty. And the reason I put this in, because not only is it a flower that holds its own name for color, which, you know, which came first, orange or orange, violet or violet. Anyway, not only does it have its own color associated with it, but it has a very interesting story that is actually tied to Valentine's Day more than roses are. So, its origin story is that it was originally the flower of Valentine's Day, because it's said that Saint Valentine, while jailed for trying to spread Christianity, crushed violets that grew by his cell and made ink, or he made ink out of the violets, so that he could send a letter to the jailer's daughter in which he had a thing for. And that kind of spurred on the Valentine's Day tradition of writing romantic letters. And so I added that flower because of that, not only because of modern times roses are more associated with Valentine's Day, but because this flower, it's now looked over for roses, even though it has more of a tie into the Valentine's Day celebration. So I thought it was very intriguing to see that a flower that is violet and seemingly has no relation to Valentine's Day is actually very connected to Valentine's Day. But it would be paired with bluebell for a humble friend who means the world to you, and laurel to show a friend you're proud of their accomplishments. Now, I'm not entirely sure why it is not more related to love, but it is related to modesty, because the flower petals and flower itself will grow low to the ground and hang their head low, a quote-unquote picture of modesty. So it's connected more to modesty than it is any love, but its origin is connected more to Valentine's Day than it is to modesty. So it's got a kind of bit of it's got a bit of a war going on there. Anyway, that is the last flower. It is probably my favorite that I read out of here, just because it was so surprising to me. I didn't know any of that. There is a lot I've learned out of this book, and I will be rereading it probably about 2 or 3 more times, just so that I can get this information lodged in my brain, because I love the idea of giving someone a bouquet, not only because it's beautiful, but because it means something. And like I said, there are bouquets in the back of this. There are 4 of them. I really like the bouquet of, I think it's like a sorrowful goodbye. That one's really nice. Anyway, yeah, if you're looking to get into florography or floriography, get this book. It is like a mini dictionary. Like I said, it's very, very beautiful. It's got, oh, there we go. It's got images on every page. It's got the whole like dictionary thing going for it. It's really pretty. It comes in hardcover. It comes in, I believe, audiobook form. Depends on where you look. I wanted a hardcover copy because I wanted to have it and look through it, and I like reading books like this rather than, you know, online. Anyway, yeah, I highly recommend this one, but if you don't want this one and you want something smaller, told you it was small, get this one. It's kind of the same idea. It'll give you a small little picture. There's the name, the scientific name, the meaning, and the origins of where it comes from. Not really what to bind it with, but you know, not everyone needs to bind it. Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna stop talking about that now. Thank you for sitting down, thank you for watching, and thank you for hopefully enjoying as much as I did. I know it wasn't a super interesting topic, but it was interesting to me, and I hope I will see you in the next one.